And then who's Sean Hannity's second guest? Oh, none other than Pam Bondi, who's talking about how people should follow the law. Listen to this.
I believe under Merrick Garland and Joe Biden that DOJ has been weaponized. With that, there are many, many employees at the Justice Department that were a part of that weaponization. Did they have an obligation not to participate in it, speak out against it? And if they didn't do so, would that be disqualifying in your mind?
Sean, certainly, you have to follow the ethical standards of being a prosecutor, and you have to follow the law. And that's why we have signed multiple executive orders taking us back to our core function of prosecuting real crime and violent crime. And that's how this Justice Department will function, and that's how President Trump wants this administration to function, even-handedly and fair, and restore integrity.
Integrity, ethics, and the rule of law. And this is a woman who wears the Donald Trump knee pads and is willing to lie for Donald Trump and won't even say who won the 2020 election. Yeah, because the first person that I think of when I think of ethics, the first person that I think of when I think of morals is definitely the orange turd. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Pammy. That makes a lot of sense. You want to talk about weaponized? How many FBI agents have you fired? And how many FBI agents are going to be left for doing their job? And she wants to talk about the rule of law. What about the guy who you support, the guy who you've coddled and raised money for, who is literally a 34-count felon? But we want to be lectured by Pam Bondi, again, the ditz who won't even say who won the 2020 election, a complete and utter imbecile who won't say who won the 2020 election. Are you kidding me? Here's Pam Bondi praising Judge Cannon. By the way, let me be clear. She calls Judge Cannon a brilliant judge. Now, why would she say that? Oh, because Judge Cannon has ruled in Donald Trump's favor every time, and then the higher-ups have ruled that Judge Cannon was wrong. But yet, if you suck up to Donald Trump or suck something, then somehow you're made to be out a hero. Notice how Pam Bondi doesn't want to talk about the January 6th insurrectionists, so many of them that were violent that day, that were pardoned. Or another January 6th insurrectionist yesterday that was caught with child who is now back in jail. Or one of those that were pardoned that got into a gunfight with officers and was killed. No, they don't want to talk about that, but follow the law, though. But if you're a white supremacist and you beat police officers with their own batons, we'll let you go. We'll pardon you because we feel like the justice system, it's been weaponized. So if you're a white supremacist and you beat up cops on January 6th, that's okay. Pam Bondi now talking about Judge Cannon, who also wears the Donald Trump knee pads. Have a listen to this.
Well, special counsels from here on out in our country will be legally appointed, and they won't be done constantly like they've been done in the past. And yeah, Judge Cannon is a brilliant judge. She followed the law. That will be upheld, and the weaponization of government will end. No more special counsels out there targeting anyone.
Really? You're not going to target anyone? Interesting, Pammy. Because the guy who is going to be leading the FBI literally has a hit list in his book of the people that he is going to go after. You have literally weaponized everyone in every entity that does not agree with Donald Trump. You have gone after FBI agents and fired FBI agents for just doing their job and conducting an investigation. Do Trump supporters out there think that there shouldn't have been an investigation after January 6th, the who, what, when, where, and why? Because that's basically what they're saying. So many of these FBI agents, they go to work every day and they did their job. But it's a two-tier justice system, right? That's what it is. Make no mistake about it. This is an oligarchy. Make no mistake about it. That's all that this is. This is a dictatorship. And Pam Bondi wants to lecture the American people about the rule of law when we have a 34-count convicted felon in the White House as the president of the United States. Pam Bondi wants to talk about the rule of law. Now, obviously, Sean Hannity is a complete right-wing boob, literally and figuratively. 2 of them. If I was interviewing the real Pam Bondi, I would ask her, Pam, you talk about the rule of law. Okay, let's see if we can have some consistency here. Donald Trump and his administration in the first couple weeks have already broken the law. You guys fired 17 attorneys general without giving Congress a 30-day notice. That is literally against the law. Pam, how would you respond to that? Now, she would probably give me a very similar answer to the answer that Stephen Miller gave to CNN and Jake Tapper, which was, we feel like that law is unconstitutional. So on one side, if they don't like the law, they're just going to break the law and say it's unconstitutional. But they claim that they want everybody to follow the law. Folks, does this make any sense at all? That is my biggest concern. Besides Elon Musk, and we'll get to that, and besides, tech billionaires having all of our personal information, one of my biggest concerns, and I have many of them, but one of my biggest concerns in the Trump administration is Donald Trump does not respect the rule of law now, and he never has. He doesn't respect rules and regulations. He doesn't respect the law because he's been breaking the law his entire life. Now, it could be inflating your assets, claiming that Mar-a-Lago is worth $10 billion. It could be members of his family allegedly stealing from their own charities. It could be hiring people within your family for financial gain. Yeah, we forget about that, don't we? We forget about Jared Kushner and the $2.1 billion he received from the Saudis because he wasn't sending Mike Pompeo out to Saudi Arabia. No. In the final months of Donald Trump's first administration, he sent Jared Kushner. And then several months later, he gets $2.1 billion. But that's America first, right? We don't hear about Ivanka Trump anymore, right? She's hiding in the basement. She made over $500 million in Chinese trademarks when she was working in Donald Trump's administration. But the MAGA morons out there still want to talk about Hunter Biden and Burisma. And Pam Bondi has the gall to talk to us about the rule of law. Donald Trump has never abided and respected law. Never has he decided to respect the rules and regulations in this country, whether it be before he got into public office or after. So I'm not about to be lectured by Pam Bondi because she is pathetic. And she is an embarrassment to this country. And quite frankly, anybody else's that can't say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. That's important. And the reason why that's important is because if they're not willing to admit the obvious because it might upset Donald Trump, then what are they willing to do now? That's why I said it back then, and that's why I say it now. If you're not willing to say that Donald Trump lost in 2020 and admit the obvious, then what is Pam Bondi willing to do for Donald Trump now that she is in this position? Think about that for a moment. Think about that. The signal controversy continues, and the Trump administration keeps digging themselves into a bigger hole, for lack of a better term. So, Attorney General Pam Bondi is not really releasing pertinent information into what's going on here, but I will say this. Listen to what Pam Bondi had to say on Fox News yesterday about the Signal Chat controversy, and she wants to bring up everything else but this actual very serious incident that took place where clearly classified information was exposed to a journalist. Have a listen to this pathetic attorney general who is so partisan, it is pathetic, in Pam Bondi.
The Signals Chat controversy that's going on. Is DOJ involved at this point? If so, why? If not, why not?
Well, first, it was sensitive information, not classified, and inadvertently released And what we should be talking about is it was a very successful mission. Our world is now safer because of that mission. We're not going to comment any further on that. If you want to talk about classified information, talk about what was at Hillary Clinton's home that she was trying to bleach a bit, talk about the classified documents in Joe Biden's garage that Hunter Biden had access to. This was not classified information, and we are very pleased with the results of that operation and that the entire world is safer because of it.
Okay, let's answer that. Let's talk about that, Miss Blonde Bimbo Attorney General. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton, shall we? Since you brought it up, you idiot. The Justice Department did investigate Hillary Clinton and her handling of the classified information. They did investigate Joe Biden's handling of classified information. Defense officials say Hegseth likely shared classified info on Signal. The DOJ has to investigate this as well. The Hillary Clinton stuff and the Joe Biden stuff has already been investigated. Let's investigate this. Let's see what exactly happened. Now, I think we all know what happened here. I'll get to that in a moment. It's very obvious what happened here. But Alina Habba, who was Donald Trump's loser attorney, who once admitted that she'd rather be good looking than smart, she made another appearance on Fox News yesterday, and she called it a hoax. Yes, that's right. Somebody in Donald Trump's administration called this a hoax. Now, Donald Trump himself called it a witch hunt. That's a famous word that he uses. But listen to Habba and the way she characterized this on right-wing propaganda Fox Noise.
And that is really the sum of it. You want to talk to me about Doge. You want to talk to me about what's happening with this Signal nonsense, where they're communicating high-level people. Maybe a mistake was made, but at the same time, I'll tell you one thing. There was high-side communications that were proper, that were done correctly, and nobody here got hurt, A. B, they were allowed to do it because there was no classified information. But you know what this is, Sean? It's the same thing we've been talking about for 4 years. It's a hoax. It's a distraction. It's the same thing they did when they said Biden had no cognitive decline, absolute garbage. And they're going to continue to do it in this administration. Why? Because we're winning. Because we're winning and we're successful, and we're going to keep hitting hard for the American people.
You're winning and you're successful, and you're going to keep hitting hard for the American people. Really? Well, would you consider it winning that gas prices are up, inflation is up around the country? Would you consider it winning that the biggest tax breaks for the top 1% continue? Would you consider it winning that a bunch of innocent people, some of them are brave men and women who have served, are losing their jobs throughout the country? Would you consider it winning that our brave men and women's lives were at risk because of this Signal chat where you have an idiot that decided to put this journalist in the chat, whether he knew or not? I would assume he didn't know. You want to talk about a blunder, but they're calling it a nothing burger and a hoax. This is not a hoax. This is not a distraction. And heads need to roll. And you guys for years were complaining about Hillary Clinton's emails. You guys still talk about it to this very day. Why is this not a big deal? You're talking about the artillery that was used, the timing of when this attack was going to happen, literally 30 minutes before the attack. And you don't think this was a big deal? You idiots. See, this is the way the right-wing media is covering this story. And listen to the way Jesse Waters characterized this Signal stuff and said it's really not a big story because there's no sex involved and there's no video. I'm not kidding. These are his own words. Have a listen to this.
Well, this is like Trump throws 20 touchdowns in a row and he finally throws a pick six. And that's what everybody wants to talk about. And the only way you get people to stop talking about it is you throw another touchdown. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like, but he's got to throw another touchdown, and he's got to throw it fast. No one outside of D.C. and in the news business really cares about this story. Mm-hmm. There's no video. There's no sex. There's no fraud. No one even knows what a Houthi is. People know who bin Laden is. People know what ISIS is. No one knows what a Houthi is.
So because there's no sex involved here, it shouldn't be spoken about. Well, it's interesting because Jesse Waters is the same guy who punctured the tires of a man who was sleeping with his woman. Maybe we should talk about that every day. Or maybe we should talk about the fact that Donald Trump raw dogged a porn star 2 weeks after Barron was born. If you want to talk about sex scandals, I got plenty of them. I absolutely have plenty of them that we can talk about if that's something you want to do. Listen, the bottom line here, and we know this 150%, is that Waltz is the guy who somehow mistakenly put this journalist in this chat because they were speaking. We also know, based on his Venmo, no, not Matt Gaetz's Venmo. We're actually talking about somebody else. We know about Waltz's Venmo that he had a number of journalists in there. Waltz is the guy that is responsible for this. He's the one who put this journalist in there. He's the one who should lose his job. Let's let the DOJ investigate this, just like they investigated Hillary Clinton, just like they investigated Joe Biden and found no criminal wrongdoing. Let's go ahead and let's look at this investigation and let's see what they come up with. This is not a hoax. This is not a distraction. Our brave men and women's lives are on the line when this type of information gets released that is highly classified. And if the argument is it wasn't highly classified, then it should have been classified. And if it should have been classified and it wasn't classified, then guess who we hold to account? Yes, none other than the woman abuser himself, Pete Hegseth. Oh, Brian, why are you calling him a woman abuser? Well, because his mother called him that. So it's either on 100% Pete Hegseth, Waltz, or both. Both need to go. And speaking of sick, what about Pam Bondi? So we live in a country where they seem to be totally okay without giving anybody due process, or very few that are being deported, any sort of due process at all. You see, in the Constitution, it says, not if you're a legal citizen, but any person. It doesn't emphasize whether you're legal or illegal, deserves the right to due process. That's what it says in our Constitution. These MAGA Republicans that want to talk about the Constitution don't seem to want to recite it when it comes to due process. But you see, if you do something to a Tesla vehicle, Pam Bondi wants you to get 20 years in prison. But if you beat a police officer on January 6th, you're a hostage and you're a patriot. Listen to Pam Bondi's strong language when it comes to Tesla and think for yourself why she's doing this.
Now, MS-13, TDA members. Look at the signs behind me on the White House lawn of all these terrorists that Donald Trump has taken off the streets. Not only that, the domestic terrorism, like you said, Tesla, 9 cases in 7 jurisdictions, and we have made it crystal clear, no negotiations. These people are facing 20 years in prison, and that's why it's going to stop. We're fighting anti-Semitism. We had our first task force meeting. We are going forward on so many things. And at President Trump's directive, we are making America safe again, especially by getting these drugs off the street.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, you're making America safe again, but let's get rid of and let's pardon a bunch of Jan 6th insurrectionists, some of whom beat police officers. You're making America much safer again. You're certainly making America whiter again. I'll give you credit for that. Yeah, you're making America white again, and you're making the top 1% richer and richer again. You're certainly doing that, but the rest of the country is struggling, and it's why you guys have a 39% approval rating, which is the lowest it's been in over 70 years. And Pam Bondi is a sycophant. And she wears the Donald Trump knee pads 24/7, and I am embarrassed for her. She is so pathetic. Speaking of pathetic, let's talk about Representative Mark Wayne Mullen, because Caitlin Collins on CNN asked him about the price of eggs because Donald Trump keeps lying about the prices of your groceries. I gave you the statistics for that. I told you that since day one, inflation is up. I told you that over 0.5%. So, and I again, I don't just say things and throw them at a wall and hope that they stick. The numbers that I gave you are literally from the Consumer Price Index data so Mark Wayne Mullen is making the case that egg prices are down since day one. By the way, they're not. They're actually up 26% since day one. But listen to Caitlin Collins question him, and listen to another Donald Trump MAGA sycophant who's afraid of, saying anything that could contradict what Donald Trump says, even if it's a lie. Have a listen to this.
This is down 22%. And when you start talking to American people, they are excited about where our country is headed.
But if the numbers are as good as the president says they are, I mean, he's wildly exaggerating how much eggs are down. They're not down 87%. If they were, people would be paying 50 cents for a dozen of eggs, which obviously,
well,
that they're
the
not.
fact is they're down. And as I said, at the height.
Right, but why not just say exactly how much they're down?
Well, at the height, it was 9.1%. So it depends on what metric you're using. At 9.1%, they're down to 2.4% now. Inflation. That is a significant drop. That's not 50%. You're getting down to actual real numbers at that point. So it depends on which point you're talking about. We can discuss wherever we want to on the eggs of what source you want to say or at what time frame he may be referring to. The fact is, prices are down, and we see them.
But they're not
continuously
down as
dropping.
much as he's saying that they're down for eggs. So I'm saying if my
so let's
argument,
use the math. What's 9.1% down to 2.4%? What's
I'm
the
saying if the
percentage?
numbers are as good as you think they are, and as you're arguing, and that's number from the agriculture department, Why not just say they're down 52% or 53%
Well-
instead of 87%?
Because they're lying for Donald Trump. They are not down 85%. In fact, if you look at the actual consumer numbers that are out there, you look at the data that I already gave to you, they're actually up 26% since day one. Now, they might be down in the last couple of weeks, but that doesn't mean they've been down from day one, because they're not, and that's a lie. And Mark Wayne Mullen is a complete imbecile. He's the same guy who wanted to physically fight somebody in the halls of Congress because he's a moron. He suffers from short man syndrome, and he is a complete moron. And I've always said this before, because I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday, and she's right, that the men that are in the workout room 20 hours a day and they're gym rats are usually trying to make up for other things in their life, and they're trying to hide something. I would say Mark Wayne Mullen is a perfect example of that, because the man is 4 feet tall.